There is a Kazuha rerun going on right now as of recording this video, and naturally the big question is, should you get him? Sure. The thing about Kazuha is that he is still one of the most universal buffer characters in the game, and thus making him one of the most universal characters just straight up in the game. He's kind of up there with the likes of Kokomi as probably having the most teams available to him because he's just so good at buffing a lot of characters. And the funny thing is that recent releases of characters, they haven't actually been that detrimental to Kaz as opposed to some other buffer characters. Essentially, the release of any physical main, Geo character, or to some extent Anemo DPS would be a character that doesn't really want to have Kaz on their team. But as long as we're not seeing much of them, Kazuha continues to be very, very relevant to the game. We're here with Kazuha and Masanori. Now, there's 35 billion teams that have been talked to death featuring Kazuha, so for the purpose of keeping this video nice and short, we're only going to focus on 3. The first, and frankly the most important team to get Kazuha for, is of course going to be Aloy Teams. Because Aloy is, well rather Kazuha is, in my estimation, still the best bomblet grouper for someone like Aloy, which is of course really important.
Ever seen one of these?
And then also he can do this thing called double swirling. Because if you have a look at Aloy's stats now, we have additional cryo damage bonus because I'm not using a cryo cup, and then we also have additional hydro damage bonus, which is of course really, really nice. Ultimately, once again, we're able to double swirl the freeze, which means that we're able to get both cryo and hydro damage bonus, which is really, really nice. And then on top of that, we're able to basically make Aloy and Farina in this team do more damage, which is really, really good. And keep in mind, for those who are curious, this is a team where there's a 40-50 split between Aloy and Farina in terms of their damage. So yeah, having Kaz there is very, very important. Now, one thing I didn't realize last time I talked about Kaz in some meaningful capacity is the value of his ult. See, you'll find a lot of guides and people out there who claim that the value of Kazuha's ult is that it does a lot of damage. That I'm not so sure about, mainly because most people will build Kazuha full EM, and full EM doesn't really do anything for Kazuha's ult damage specifically. Instead, I believe the big value of Kazuha's ult is actually in its nature to extend the buff that Kazuha has with his A4. VV will wear off within 8 seconds, but you can still get more value out of Kazuha's A4 passive if you manage to use his ult. So, right now, we don't have any additional cryo damage bonus, and Aloy currently has only 28% cryo damage bonus. When we swirl, that is how we get an additional 32.3% cryo damage bonus, because I only have 808 EM, thus bringing Aloy's cryo damage bonus up to 61. But after a period of time, even that bonus is going to wear off. In fact, I believe it's worn off now, which means we are now back to 28.8% cryo damage bonus. So if I were to do this, I'm going to put a timer up, and you'll notice that the damage bonus coming from Kazuha is actually lasting for a very, very long time. It's actually lasting for almost, well, it should be lasting for around 16 seconds, and it's disappeared just now. So that is a very, very long time where we get to have Kazuha's increased damage for Aloy. All this to say, off-field swirling extends Kazuha's A4, which is why his ult is actually really, really useful. Now, another team that I've been enjoying quite a lot is Thundering Dory. And normally I would play Thundering Dory with Masanori, against Masanori, with Fischl as some sort of Fischl A4 driving team, but there is another alternative, which is to play Thundering Dory as like a hyper Dory team. Because Dory can actually sort of overpower Nahida's Dendro application. So whilst most people have mentioned in the past that like the problem with Nahida is that her Dendro application is a little bit too strong, you can actually use Kazuha's ult to infuse with Electro, which you can do by doing self-applied Electro via something like Dory's Lamp. And that can be another source of Electro application, which will then work in tandem with Dory's Electro application to try and overtake Nahida's Dendro application for a brief moment so that we can do some Electro swirls as well. On top of that, in a team like Thunder and Dory, where we're playing a lot of Hyper Bloom shenanigans, where we also have Hydro, someone like Farina or in some other cases, Yalan's off-field Hydro application will also be weakening the Dendro aura just enough so that we can also get the Electro swirls. And on occasion, you can also double swirl in this team by somehow double swirling Electro Charge while Nahida's Dendro application is off briefly, and that could result in even more team damage. That's of course really, really good. On top of that, if you manage to do an Electro-infused Kazuha ult in a team like this, then Kazuha could be the one who's triggering Hyper Blooms, and because of the way you normally build Kazuha being a lot of EM, there's a good to fair chance he's going to end up doing slightly stronger Hyper Blooms than Dory at the very least. And finally, we have a stronger team that I also regularly play, and that is, of course, Neuvillette. Because Neuvillette, like I mentioned in the Neuvillette rerun, which is also happening concurrently, is ludicrously strong. And he is a newer character who can also make use of someone like Kazuha.
Fallen leaves, adorn my night, one with nature.
In order to do a lot of extra damage. Not only are we using Kazuha to fulfill one of Neuvillette's passives, being, I believe, the A1 passive, which is the 3 stacking passive, but then on top of that, we're also swirling a lot of Hydro damage, which of course is really, really good because we've got both Neuvillette and Farina on the team, thus meaning there's a lot of Hydro damage. So for these kinds of sort of mono element teams, even if this is technically not a mono element team because Layla was involved, Kazuha's value in a team like this is really, really high because he's basically able to super buff characters like Neuvillette and Farina. And because Neuvillette and Farina are HP scalers, it means that there's actually not as many buffer characters out there for like HP scalers technically. So having someone like Kaz there is just an option that exists in order to at least give them some additional damage percent bonuses, which of course is very, very nice. Now, since Kazuha's last rerun, we've started to see a lot of Fontanian characters, and there's probably only been 2 characters in particular that kind of put a minor dent on Kazuha's sort of value in terms of his universality, and that is, of course, Chevrus and Chiori. Now, of course, Chiori is a Geo character, so it is what it is. But with Chevy, she's kind of gunning for Kazuha's role in quite a few Pyro and Electro character teams. Because the way that Chevy works is that she actually takes on the role of Kazuha in terms of at least being a VV to some extent user, and then also if you manage to get C6 Chevy, then you also get Kazuha's damage buff, more or less. So she really is turning into basically overload Kazuha. And so for a team in particular, it's Raiden Hyper, where Kazuha has apparently lost sort of his relevance in that kind of setup because Chevrus exists. So according to XL Impact players, Raiden Hyper with Chevrus, Sara, and Xiangling, Oppa, is apparently more DPS than the original Raiden Hyper, Raiden, Kazuha, Sara. So, you know, take that for what you will. That's actually something to keep in mind. I've also heard rumors of talk of thoughts of feelings that potentially Shigvin, who is, for those who don't remember, the half Melusine, half human somehow character, the child nurse in the Fortress of Meripede, She might be the electrocharged version of Chevy. So we'll see what happens there. I'm not entirely sure if that's going to be true. But if she does end up being that case, then Kazuha's value in Taser-esque teams is probably going to get overtaken by Shigbin. So that's going to be very interesting to see what happens there. All of this to say, should you get him? If you're an Aloy main, yes. Absolutely. But if you're anyone else, I don't know, maybe. Yeah, you probably should, but at the same time, Arlecchino is like coming really soon. Glorand is coming really soon. Can you afford to get Kazuha when there's a Farina rerun incoming eventually? You tell me. Alright, that's probably the most part of the video, so let's go on to the real easy stuff. How to build Kazuha, because here's the thing, there's 3 trillion guides with permutations, calculations, tabulations, and assertions on how to build him, but the reality is he's actually really straightforward to play. When it comes to his weapons, there's only 3 weapons to think about, and that is Freedom Sworn, Zyphos Moonlight, and Fav. If you want to use Freedom Sworn, go ahead. It is, of course, his 5-star weapon. I personally don't think it's worth it. There are going to be a lot of people who also think it's not worth it. You do probably want to have a lot of ER substats and potentially even an ER sand if you're going to use Freedom Sworn, because like I mentioned, his ult is very useful, so I would highly recommend building to be able to do that regularly. But if you can use his ult on the regular, let's say because your team somehow has a lot of energy coming in anyway, then sure, Freedom Sworn is great. It's got a good passive, so definitely great for someone like Kazuha. But, I'd say it's not worth getting. It's a 5-star weapon after all. When it comes to Zyphos Moonlight, which is of course a newer weapon that came around with Sumeru in particular, it is a weapon that can only be acquired from the weapon banner, and it's only showed up twice in the year and a half that it's been released. Now, oddly enough, it's shown up both times with the Key of Kashnasu, which I guess means the big question if you want to get Zyphos Moonlight is, hey, when's the next Nilo rerun? But if you read the passive, it is a very strong passive, so it's a very good alternative for Kazuha. Some people may claim that it might be better than Zyphos Moonlight in certain situations. I'm not entirely sure if that's true, but it is a very strong weapon. That being said, Fav Sword exists. Now, some people don't have that many Fav Swords, which does mean that Fav Sword is a bit of a tricky situation. But I somehow have a lot of Fav Swords, and I don't understand how that happens. So Fav on Kaz is pretty much my go-to, and it is a permanent fixture for him. So that's basically the weapon that I'll be using. It's great for battering him, but more importantly in teams like French Loy and even Thundering Dory, it is a weapon that is great at battering other energy-hungry characters. And enemy-hungry characters like Farina, Lisa, Miko to some extent, the Haya. This is a weapon that is great to help solve their problems as well. Obviously with Miko, you could just get C1 and you're fine. But for the other characters, you're going to have to figure out some other ways, and Fav Sword is a really good choice. Alright, let's talk about artifacts. Viridis and Venera, that's it. And in terms of the artifact substats, it's triple EM. That's it. Just try and aim for as much EM and ER as you can. You're good. I haven't even leveled up Kazuha's talents. Like, at all. He's still on 111 talents, and I have no desire at all to level him up any further with regards to those talents. Some people argue to level up his ult, but again, if you're part of the 99% of the player base that plays specifically buffer Kazuha, and you're running full EM, your ult's not going to do a whole lot of damage, like, at all, because I'm not putting in crit stats into my Kazuha build. I'm certainly not putting in attack stats into my Kazuha build. I don't really care about his damage. Most of his damage is swirls, honestly. So it is what it is. Now, okay, that being said, the bird showed up, and with the bird, you could potentially play like a plunge DPS Kazuha. I have no idea how to build plunge DPS Kazuha. I guess the usual methods: 2-piece, 2-piece Anemo attack, or hell, even 2-piece, 2-piece Anemo, because there's 2 Anemo sets. 4-piece Vermilion if you're playing with Farina. Maro Shosei if you're playing with Farina. I don't know. Do you go attack Anemo crit? Do you go EM Anemo crit? I don't know. Let me know in the comments what you think about that. If you are one of the 3 plunge DPS Kazuha mains. I swear there's less plunge DPS Kazuha mains than there are Aloy mains just in general. And that's saying something because there's only 59 of us at the present moment. And finally, when it comes to Kazuha's Constellations, everything I said in my last Should You Get Kazuha video stands even to this day. Nothing has changed. If you really want to get C1 Kazuha, just play Sack Sword Kazuha instead. Sack Sword is a totally legit option. I didn't include it in my video, in my weapons section because Fab is better, but Sack Sword is an option. If you really want C2, just play C6 Sucrose. Just move on with your life. If you want to play C3 or C5, don't, because like I said, those talents don't matter at all for 99% of us. I guess if you're a plunge Kazuha main, one of those 2 actually will be useful because it's your skill damage. But even then, I don't think it really matters. I had to look up what C4 Kazuha even is because I forgot what it was, but apparently it's an energy constellation, and I use Fab. I've never had an energy problem at all, and C6 is only for DPS Kazuha mains, so if you're one of the 5 DPS Kazuha mains out there, great. C6 is precisely for you. So that's Kazuha. He is, again, still the strongest universal buffer character in the game because he pretty much works with everyone who is Electro, Cryo, Pyro, or Cryo. And then he also works for Dendro characters because he can be used in Aggravate teams, he can be used in Hyper Bloom teams, he can also be used in Burgeon teams like a Burgeon Trigger if you want to do that kind of shenanigan. Or he could be a way of buffing burning damage, so he's also good in Dendro teams as well. He's obviously not going to do anything in Geo teams, with the rare exception of maybe the Navia domain, artifact domain. And yeah, and then otherwise he's just also useful for HP scaling characters, EM scaling characters, attack scaling characters, maybe not defense scaling characters because so far the main defense scaling characters are Noelle and Ito, and Xinyan is a physical main when she's using her defense scaling in some meaningful capacity, so Kazuha doesn't really work with defense scaling characters at the present moment, but otherwise for attack, HP, EM scaling characters, and ER scaling characters in the form of Kazuha is a really good choice for all of those types, so that's still what makes him really, really good. But yeah, otherwise, if you don't want to get Kaz, but you still want to have, to some extent, his effectiveness, you could still play Sucrose, but I personally don't like playing Sucrose because I think she's clunky as all hell. Which I guess is a reason to get Kazuha's Constellations, but I would not recommend spending money on Kazuha's Constellations. Because Sucrose exists, just do better than me and get good at playing Sucrose, and suddenly you don't need to get any of Kazuha's Constellations. It's that simple. Anyway, let me know what you think about all of this in the comments below. How do you feel about Kazuha? Let me know in the comments. Otherwise, hope you guys enjoyed. If you like this video, hit that like button, subscribe for more Genshin Impact action, and until next time, I will see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Bye.
strength.
The hunt is on.
I was destined